Yeah, so the first thing I was thinking of was like, we've been coming here for 2 years now, maybe a bit longer. Is it 2.5 years for you?
It's June 2016.
Yeah, and I was wondering what does the sort of, what comes with the longevity of it? Like what happens over years that doesn't happen if you just come here one time?
Well, I think we were chatting about that last night. Actually, there's a feeling aspect that changes because of the deepening of relationships with people. But I think what really happens over time, not only do we learn more, and so we, I think get better at how we can facilitate here. But I think that there's a sense that you get the feedback of when a difference is made for people. And we got that immediately, but now you see it more and more. You see people who are incredibly traumatized, feeling so changed in their life, and they say it's because of this. You see them finding a sense of community, working with other people. You see the excitement of people learning skills and bringing it out into their communities. So it feels like you feel like you're part of a real, not just coming and doing an event, but you're part of a real process that's really, what we're here for, to really support the reconciliation process in the country. And the feedback from the government, from NURC, from local authorities, is like saying, it's like we're working all together with these different institutions here and our work in CFOR and GER, and we're kind of doing something. So it feels good.
It's interesting how, like, today we interviewed Desiree and Augustine. Have you heard about them? We heard about this, where Augustine's given some of his land
I did hear.
to Desiree. And there's things like that which are very, like, great stories to share. There's also smaller things where the girl we just interviewed is her first forum, and she didn't really speak much through the forum, but she said, sitting here, she was like, this is going to change how I am in my life. I feel like I can teach people things.
Yeah, I've heard it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And it's an exciting feedback, but more than that, it's like it makes you get a sense of hope that actually facilitating these deeper interactions actually have a long-reaching effect. In the sense that we're here working on the genocide, right? But because of its long-lasting impact.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of jumping, but I feel like if you think of the genocide, and then there's a, what then? After such a violent conflict and genocide, what then? And a lot of people, in the world moves on and they think that's a long time ago, and they're, like we are often talking about, it's this huge impact of collective trauma, and it's so much and so impossible, really. And so much has been done in the country with the accountability and the tribunals and the Gacaca courts, and there's this great will to say, come on, we can do this, and we're all one, and we're moving forward. But then when you hear what it's actually like, and that people have never actually talked together,
Yeah.
and that they never thought they would in that kind of real way, and then when it happens and you see their hope and their change and what's possible, yeah, it's great to be part of it.
There are some things that, today we've interviewed a lot of people who were either, very young during the genocide, like the last girl was born a week into the genocide. And then there's...
imagine.
Yeah, it's incredible. And young people that were, born from the mothers were raped. And pretty much all of these young people have just not been able to have the conversations with their parents, with their mothers that they want to have.
Yeah.
And that is, how's that going to happen? Do you know what I mean? What's the motive or what I'm asking?
Well, they answered, they said it's going to happen. That's what was so beautiful. I was thinking that there was that process of youth We've had several over at different forums, but the group of youth that were in the last forum, and one of the things that touched me was what you're saying, that they were looking, first the pain of not being able to know the history, that we keep hearing again and again, the pain that they can't talk to their parents and their parents don't speak to them. And we keep hearing that again and again. But what touched me was also their fervor about, kind of passion about that, and they're angry about it also. But there was also this incredible love and sensitivity and honoring of their elders. I don't know if that there was a sense of when they said, we understand our parents' limits and that they can only go so far. And we understand why, because it's so painful for them. And so now, because of the forum and the interaction, having learned more and had more of these interactions there, they said, we can do this. We can go home and talk to our parents. And we can maybe inspire them. Or if they can't do it, we can do it. We can do the work that's needed for the future of Rwanda. I think that touched me, maybe one of the most, so many things are touching. That was one of the most touching things in the forum this time.
You've kind of answered what I was going to ask next, but I'll ask it again more directly to see if it brings up anything else. Like, why do you feel that youth has been so central to all of their forums? Mm-hmm. It's been, you say to them, what do you want to talk about? And it comes out in this strong energy of
the youth.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is the first time, I think, that when people started speaking about the youth, and we've heard that in other places we work, comes more from the adults at first, going like, well, the youth have problems and the youth aren't engaged, or the youth have problems with drugs or whatever. But they don't really talk to the youth or listen to the youth. So one of the ways we're working is to say, let's not just talk about it, let's find out what the youth have to say. And then we've learned that here in Rwanda, but we've learned it in other places also, that a lot of times parents think the children are the youth, the young, from late teens to the young adults, that they don't, they think they're not really interested. And then when you talk to them and ask them what they're interested in, you find out they're incredibly interested, and they're hungry to find out how they could be involved. But I don't know if that's answering you, because you're saying why is that the case?
It's both. I think that's great. But why is it so strong for the front?
I think that most people don't stop and think about the reality that when you've had a genocide or a violent conflict, if you don't stop and really as a society go deeper into that process of reconciliation and accountability and dealing with all that trauma, it stays there and people feel it and they don't know quite what it is all about, and it blocks the recovery of the country. It blocks every aspect of the country. It's like you can pour money into creating infrastructure, rebuilding the society, but the spirit isn't there. And I think that, to get back to your question, I think the youth know that. They might not know it like thinking about it so much, that in fact, if we don't process that, this can happen again in the next generation. And that we know it is likely that violence cycles, and if you don't process what happened in history, you're going to get violence again. And so I don't know if that's right. I haven't thought of it quite like that, but I think that the young people, they know that.
Yeah.
And they're going, for God's sake, I don't want this to happen in my future. I don't want this to happen again. I want to have a life I want to create the Rwanda that we're trying to create. I want it to really happen and make it happen. So they're and like people are saying, they know it. They're in the future. They're the real thing. Yeah. So they met, and one other thing that was kind of beautiful was when the youth all stood up. Remember the whole kind of forum with 170 people or whatever we were. Yeah. And there were about 30, 40 young people when they came in the middle, and everybody clapped. And I think it was really from the heart to say, look at these young people, they want to do this work. And it gives a sense of hope. I don't know if that answers.
That's great. No, it's fantastic. And it feels like, maybe from talking to them in interviews, they don't do that. Like, they don't give the chance to really just have the right space. They have their sort of organizations, but just having that space to be listened to is rare.
Yeah, so that's important to say, that it's not, we see that they're hungry for it, they're ready for it, they're contributing, they want to do the work it takes to reconcile, but they haven't had opportunities. And people didn't know, like one of the leaders there from the NURC spoke very personally, saying to me, she didn't know, that she had no idea that the youth were feeling like this. Because there's so little dialogue with the parents, because there is this, one also to understand that it's coming from this great will and political will and the people of this country saying, we can do this, we're all Rwandans now. And that's incredible, and it's a model for many places in the world. But if they from there they can work on these things, that's what we've seen. But if from there you think there's no problems, then it backfires. So the young people are saying that they need a space to talk about these things. And what I was going to say is she hadn't heard, she didn't realize that people like children who had been worked rape and people who, the sons and daughters of perpetrators, who remember there were these guys who stood up, the perpetrators, sons of perpetrators, and the pain and anguish they shared with the group, and the plea, if you are a perpetrator, talk to your kids. She never had any idea that something like that was, and so when she sees it, she says, we need more of this.
Shifting a little bit to, this is another thing that I feel like has been at the forums all along, but it seems to be bubbling up even more this time, was the sort of violence that men do to women. And the sort of, just to say it bluntly, a thing that I've been realising is it seems that it's been, I'm not going to say easier, but I'll just say it seems easier for a perpetrator to say they killed somebody than to take accountability for raping somebody. And I was just wondering your feelings on that, and why it's that next step of people aren't taking accountability for that, from what I've seen.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge topic. So first of all, I think that's probably true, that it's almost, it's such a big thing to even speak about, but it's probably true that it's easier for people who've been perpetrators of the genocide to talk about people they killed than it is to talk about rape, because it's so taboo.
Here.
I think it's something in the world that people haven't known about until fairly recently, and some of us knew about it a long time, but that rape was used as a tactic of genocide. So it's not like men just started raping people. It's a tactic that's meant to destroy a community, to destroy the women, to destroy the soul of relationship in communities, and there's other aspects to it. It's just such a tragic thing, and then and to even begin to talk about it, women have told us that they can't even talk to their husbands. And so this is related to the trauma, their own and the whole countries and their families. It's related to sexism and this sense that it's somehow their fault, even if they were raped. In the same way we run into that all over the world.
Yeah.
It's related very deeply to gender dynamics and sexual violence that happens separate from the genocide that happens in society. So, there's so much there.
I was wondering, it's probably not something you can answer, and you cut it out if it's a useless question, but I was wondering, what needs to happen next on that topic? Is it that perpetrators need to stand up and say, I did this? Or is it that survivors, I guess survivors are already sharing their testimony about what's happened to them. I was just wondering, what is the next?
One of the things when you talk about did I interrupt you?
No, that's good. No, go for it.
Well, one of the things that is important when you think of what's next around any difficult topic is to look at the wisdom of the group. So this is what we're always doing when we're facilitating is going deeper into the interactions and dialogue in the group. Certain processes emerge and directions emerge. So when we were working on the topic of sexual violence that came up at a particular moment, somebody, I think, proposed one way we should go forward. We can think of this as well, and GER, and we have, but it came out of the group that one of the next steps forward would be to bring together a group of perpetrators, or bring together a group of men to talk more generally about gender and sexual violence. But certainly when we've had a chance to bring together a group of perpetrators, people who've been perpetrating, they are able to talk among themselves more readily. I wonder, since you asked about that, let's just stay there for a bit. Yeah, I don't know if this will be useful in the context that you're asking right now, but I think maybe one of the things that this would link to is when you're talking about subjects that are that painful and difficult and that have affected people so deeply and so personally. So one thing I think I was starting to think about was this importance of following very carefully the group and their ideas. So one idea that came out of talking about sexual violence was, let's get a group of men together to talk about this. And so to raise awareness among men before meeting also and talking together with women. And we had a Women's Day where we spoke of women, particularly about this topic of rape and so that they could talk among themselves. So that was one thing. And then I wanted to also just say that when you are going to talk about such sensitive topics, it's a feeling, and it's like, how do you touch on so difficult topics like that without recreating the pain, or without people being terrified to go there because it's just going to make everyone feel worse, or it's not going to work to bring out the healing that's wanted. So this is where we're often talking about hotspots.
Yeah,
that's like it's taboo, and it's a big hotspot, which means that point where you touch it and everybody goes like, let's not go there.
Yeah.
Or you touch it and you fall in and there's kind of escalation and a sense like, oh my God, we're back in it all again. And so this is where it's important to go to that spot and go really slowly and really carefully. But also what I wanted to say is to remind people, and this is such a big thing, but I don't know how to talk about it well, but to remind people that we can do this. And in a group like this, and that's part of it, we were asking before about what it's like when you're here over time. But over time, that sense of some of the people have been to more than one forum, and there's a sense of building a big pot, a kind of home where we realize we can actually talk about impossible things together. And so through that, I don't know, it's that through that experience that is possible, through the belief that is possible, and having come through impossible situations and being as far as they are now as a country, I'm sure people can do it, and they want to, specifically to talk further about not only the finding information about those who've been killed and where their remains are and all of these things and keep coming back that are so important to people, but also about rape and how we're going to heal that or talk about that.
There was one question that I was going to ask, and it almost felt like too generic a question, but now I think with what you said, the question I was going to ask you in quite a general way is almost like, what is facilitation? What are you doing here? But now taking it a bit further, you're talking about hotspots. Of like, is this why you're here? Because when the community's trying to deal with their past and their trauma, it's hard without a facilitator to stand there with someone who, like a survivor from perpetrator. It's hard to have a conversation without running away or getting into a fight so what is it that you are doing, and why what is it that you bring here that's needed?
Well, I think you're starting to say it. So I want to say a couple of things about it. One is that, I often think about this, that somehow from the beginning of time, probably people got together and sat together and tried to work out stuff and work on real problems of community. So, and it's, you know, it's in many aspects of our life. It's in facilitation, and it's in religious practices. It's in all kind of community practices, law. There's all sorts of structures and people and institutions to try to work with these things. But one of the things that doesn't really happen is like we were talking about, how do you work with these spots that are volatile, scary, where if you talk about it, what's likely to happen is it's going to all blow up again. People feel. And it's true. If there's not facilitation, just talking about, we all know that, they're talking about a difficult topic, it erupts again. And then you find yourself on the same conflict. And all of us know that from our own kitchen sinks.
Absolutely.
You know, you're having a fight with a partner or a family member, and you start to go, better not ever approach that topic, because if you do, you're just back into it again. Yeah. And so that's the thing, you know, I think that's so, you know, well, for me, I think it's the most important thing of all. It's when I kind of have a passion for, is that people haven't had a chance, haven't had no methods to say, what do you do at those spots? And so that's our work, is to kind of remind people that it could be possible, that we're going to go to those spots and we're going to go there carefully, that those spots are actually doorways to a deeper contact with one another, if we can facilitate it instead of just flip out and react or run away. Yeah.
It brings me on to, like, obviously you're training people here as well.
Yeah.
What is the...
But one sec before we go, let me just think, there's something, because my head's in another space. Because I think I want to go to also mention, so after a genocide or a violent conflict, you know, it's not just a conflict at your kitchen sink.
Right.
And it's the magnitude of that kind of the magnitude of a genocide or the magnitude of a violent conflict like that is so pervasive, and it affects people so personally in every family, and we've heard in every community, and so there's certain processes that have to happen. And for example, Rwanda has done more than most places in the world and is really a model. So you have to have processes of accountability. So you have like tribunals, international tribunals, and then here they have the Gacaca courts, which were, you know, like extraordinary. They're using like traditional techniques to say, let's sit around the grass. If you confess and take accountability for what you did, then you may have a prison sentence, or you may be able to go back to your community and you should make reparations. And the idea was, now let's go forward whole as a society. We're all Rwandans. So then, okay, that's beautiful. But then there's like, then what? So then you've got all these people, and real people, each individual, each family, each community isn't going to reconcile that easily. And that's what people keep saying. They've never had a chance to talk. So when we come together, it's not just the methods we use, it's that we come together at all and say, oh, communities need to gather and talk together. And then it will come like, well, how do you do that? You're going to need facilitation, because how will you talk about such sensitive things without some methods to do that? But it's already a really big thing to have the idea that communities could gather and have conversations that include the everyday person, and that include the religious leaders, that include the elders, that include the youth, that include the survivors and the perpetrators. Let's bring us all together and do this. And that, it doesn't happen anywhere. So that's what's sort of so exciting about it, when people come and they go, oh my God, I didn't know that was possible. And, you know, and I can't tell you how many, you two probably have heard how many times we've heard that I've never had a conversation before with a perpetrator. I've never heard this before. I didn't know it was possible. Or if I heard maybe a testimony or somebody coming and asking for forgiveness, but I've never been able to really interact and find out more and actually become friends with this person. And so then you need a methodology. How do you work with those difficulties? And that's where the Worldwork methodology we're using has been incredibly useful.
There's another question that might seem obvious to you, And I'm sort of asking this in a sort of layman's kind of way, but I think it's
That's good.
important to get your perspective on it. And this typical question I wrote is, why is accountability so important?
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think also often there's this thing of like, just get on with your life.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like we talked about, it's in the past.
Yeah.
Deal with it, move on. But people are desperate for this.
Yeah.
So why is it? What is it? Why is it like the key? One of the key.
It's one of the key things. Yeah. So when people are wounded so deeply, when there's so much trauma, especially, there's different parts of how you can begin to heal that trauma. One is also just being witnessed, being included in a community with who you are and what you experienced. This is so important. It's maybe not answered the question exactly yet, but it's if you feel like I'm traumatized and so I'm somehow sick and I'm isolated from my community, it just gets worse and worse. But to be able to give a testimony in a community, to be loved and included, and people hear and feel with you, alongside of you, is tremendously healing for people. It shocks me every time, actually, how important it is. But there's this other, I don't want to say. There's that great question of why is accountability so important? And when you've been hurt so deeply and you have so much trauma, part of healing is having somebody take accountability for what they've done. Why that's so? It's just something really deep inside of us. And there's so much we can say about it, but just to know, on one thing that's really important is that people keep saying, I need to know the details, I need to know what happened. So you can imagine if you've lost somebody, if you never found out what happened to them, you can't come to some sort of closure. If you've lost family, if you've lost loved ones and you're grieving and you're the impact of that, it's hard for people, sometimes people think, well, that's a long time ago, it's 24 years. But if you've lost a loved one or a lover or a family member, just a few years is like 5 years. Is that long? Not really. Imagine 24 years for a genocide where a million people have been killed in 100 days, and your family and your have been all involved in all of these horrific stories and painful things we've heard. So people are looking for answers. So on one level, they're looking for, where are the remains of my loved one? I can't rest until I found them. So I can't find some closure. It never goes away, but you can find some closure. And when you know what's happened, when you know where they were buried, then you can give them a dignified burial. And then you can say life can go on. And until that happens, you can't. It's with you every single day. And sometimes, so what I want to say also about accountability is when somebody can come forward, and those who were perpetrators of the genocide are starting to understand that more and more, that if they come forward, it's not just to say, I was there, I killed somebody, but do they have any kind of feeling about it? And not just feeling about what they did and the remorse, but to express the remorse if they have that, but to also feeling about the impact, that it's not something they did 24 years ago, and I'm sorry for that. It's the impact of my action is ongoing forever for you and for me, for us as a country. And when a survivor feels someone who's been a perpetrator actually grapple with that and feel a deep sadness for what they've done to you, a relationship starts to form, and that's what we've seen. Like when Ellie spoke about what he did and then showed his incredible remorse, and he was weeping, and survivors were coming to him and saying, when you tell the truth like that, the horrific truth he told, but when we see your pain and your sorrow and your remorse for what you've done, we love you. This is what we need. Yeah.
There's one, it's funny, there's questions I was asking in some of the interviews in recent days. that started off me asking about, you know, often where survivors don't trust the information that they're getting from perpetrators. But it sort of led to a more interesting conversation I started having where we was talking about how the survivors seem to know when they're hearing the truth.
Yeah.
So it's like, it went a lot deeper, the conversations, than I thought. At first it was like, almost like a general question of like, why is it hard for survivors to trust? But then it led to these conversations where we talked about how it feels when they know they've got the right information, and there's something interesting that happens.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's I think we all get it if you stop and think about it. If you've been hurt by someone or betrayed by someone, and you want to know what happened, and you want to know the details of what happened, and when someone tells the truth, something in you can settle. And then when you feel that someone actually gives a damn about it, that they're actually sorry that they did it, and not just sorry, but that they feel and care about the fact that they can never take it back, and that your life has been affected by that. It goes in, and it's a weird thing. So when perpetrators come and they ask for forgiveness, I think this is quite important that in this country they use that word, asking for that expression, asking for forgiveness. They mean acknowledging what you've done and going to the person who you've offended when they're, if you've hurt their family or killed their family, and acknowledging and taking accountability, and then asking for forgiveness, meaning that you need them so that you can return to community. But sometimes when the perpetrators do that too quickly, or not too quickly because it's too long, when perpetrators ask for forgiveness, it sounds like it, or if they say it in a way that is kind of about them, trying to relieve their guilt and wanting something from the survivor, it can be inflammatory. The survivor needs to know that the perpetrator wants to give something to them, wanting to give back, and so part of that is the feeling, and then from that feeling, like reparations. And it needn't be a huge reparation in terms of money, but a reparation in the sense of wanting to give something back, wanting to do whatever they can to make life a bit better for that person. And when that's there, we see the relationships change, so like transform in ways that you can barely, believe what you're seeing. Yeah.